Once upon a time, in a city where the nights buzzed with neon lights and the days blurred with the hum of traffic, there lived a man named Owen. His apartment was a modest space on the 7th floor of an old brick building. The kind with creaky floors and pipes that clanked in the night. Owen, in his late 20s, spent most of his time at home, staring at the same four walls. He worked from a desk pushed against a window that overlooked the city. His days passed in a haze of emails and deadlines, and his nights were quiet, filled with the soft hum of his fridge and the occasional bark of a dog outside. Owen felt small, like a single thread in a tapestry, too vast to ever notice him. But every evening, as he closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, a sound would pull him out of his fog. The faint strains of a harmonica floated through the thin walls, slow and soulful, like a conversation carried on the wind. It came from the apartment next door. Owen had never spoken to the old man who lived there. He only knew him as Mr. Finch, a retired teacher. Judging by the stacks of dusty books he'd seen when the door was ajar, they'd nodded at each other in passing, exchanging the occasional "good morning," but that was it. Still, the harmonica became a comfort, a small anchor in the lonely currents of Owen's days. One evening, as the music played, Owen found himself sitting on the floor by the wall they shared, listening. When it stopped, he hesitated, then knocked gently. The door opened moments later, and there stood Mr. Finch. He was shorter than Owen had expected, with a pair of suspenders holding up his trousers and a plaid scarf draped over his shoulders. His face was lined with age, but his eyes sparkled with a kind of quiet joy. "Evening," Mr. Finch said, his voice warm. "You're Owen, right?" Owen nodded, suddenly feeling awkward. I wanted to say your music is nice. It helps." A smile spread across the old man's face. "Well, thank you. Haven't had an audience in a while. Come on in." That night, Owen found himself sitting at a small round table in Mr. Finch's cozy apartment. The room was a mosaic of memories, faded photographs, shelves crammed with books, and a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the coffee table. Mr. Finch poured 2 mugs of tea and placed a tin of biscuits on the table. "You know, life's funny," he said, stirring his tea. "We spend so much time rushing, worrying about things that don't matter, and we forget to notice what's right in front of us." Owen sipped his tea, unsure what to say. "Take it from me," Finch continued. I've lived alone for years, and it's easy to feel like the world's forgotten you. But you're not alone, son. Not really. You just got to let people in. The words hit Owen harder than he expected. He looked around at the room, at the evidence of a life lived fully, even in solitude, and felt something shift inside of him. Over the weeks that followed, Owen and Mr. Finch became unlikely friends. They shared meals, swapped stories, and sometimes just sat in companionable silence. Finch would tell tales of his younger days, of students who'd made him laugh, of love and heartbreak, of adventures big and small. One evening, as they sat on Finch's balcony overlooking the city, Owen confessed, "I've been feeling stuck, like I'm just floating through life, and no one would notice if I disappeared." Finch leaned back in his chair, harmonica resting on his knee. The trouble with being young is thinking you have to have it all figured out. He said, "The truth is, no one does. But you're here, Owen. You're alive. And that means something." He picked up the harmonica and began to play. A slow, sweet tune that carried Owen's thoughts to places he hadn't dared to dream of in years. One night, Finch handed Owen a small, worn harmonica. "Take this," he said. "You've got music in you. Everyone does. You just have to let it out." Owen laughed, shaking his head. "I've never played a note in my life." "Doesn't matter," Finch replied, his eyes twinkling. "Life's not about being perfect. It's about trying, about feeling." As the months passed, Owen found himself spending less time staring at the walls and more time living. He played the harmonica, badly at first, but with growing confidence. He reached out to friends he hadn't spoken to in years. He even started smiling at strangers in the elevator. And through it all, Finch was there. His steady presence a reminder that life didn't have to be grand to be meaningful. One evening as they sat together, Finch raised his tea and said, "To life, Owen, and to letting it surprise you." Owen smiled, raising his own mug. "To life." Sometimes the simplest connections remind us that even in our loneliest moments, we are never truly alone. The end.